And hello again from Fox News in Washington. With the economy stalled and Washington deadlocked, we begin today with whether our government will do anything to help get Americans back to work. Joining us now, House Majority Leader Eric Cantor, who is one of the key figures pushing the Republican agenda. And Congressman Cantor, welcome back to Fox News Sunday.
Good to be here, Chris.
President Obama and the Democrats are portraying you these days as the face of Republican obstructionism, repeatedly calling you out by name.
I'd like Mr. Cantor to come down here to Dallas and explain what exactly in this jobs bill does he not believe in? What exactly is he opposed to?
We'll get into the question of what you oppose in the Obama jobs bill and what you support in a moment. But how do you, speaking generally, how do you feel about being the new political villain, according to the Democrats?
Well, you know, I guess a lot of the folks on the other side of the aisle want to boil this down to personality, and it's really not about that. The differences that we have with this president are policy-based, and we know in this town, Chris, there's a lot of differences right now, and I think the people of this country want to see us try and set aside those differences and actually come together on the things that we can agree on. We agree that the economy is woefully weak. We agree that there is too much income disparity in this country. We believe that everyone ought to be lifted up, and we ought to be working on the policies that help that happen, which is to focus on small businesses. And that's what we're doing going forward.
All right, let's break this down and talk specifics. Let's look at the president's jobs plan, which was blocked in the Senate this week. Here it is. $245 billion in tax cuts and incentives, $140 billion in new spending on infrastructure and aid to states, $62 billion in aid to the unemployed. Question, what's wrong with that plan?
Well, the plan in total was one that was met with a lot of resistance, frankly, on both sides of the aisle when the president unveiled it in September. And so when the president spoke that night, I said, let's work together, stop the all-or-nothing approach. We're not going to be for tax increases on small businesses. He knows that. The Senate just killed the bill this week. So we've said since the beginning, when the president's come to my district, I've said again and again, Mr. President, we want to work with you. We've got our plan here. This is a plan for America's job creators. We've got 12 bills sitting over in the Senate that are things that the president says he believes in. Let's work together. Let's find some of the things in his plan that we agree with. And let's go ahead and do that for the American people.
Okay, well, we'll get to the Republican plan, and I agree, there is a plan, and we'll get to that in a moment. But you say that there are parts of the Obama plan that you can support. Like what?
Well, I mean, this week was indicative of how we can come together. We passed 3 big trade bills that have been over 5 years in the making. We have a 3% withholding bill that we're going to bring up in another week to help small businesses in the way they conduct their businesses with any government. We've also have bills coming forward the president says he supports to help small businesses access financing and capital so they can begin to grow and create jobs. The president talks a lot about the need for unemployment insurance reform. We've had that in our plan, Chris, since 2 years ago. When we were in the minority, then Leader Boehner and I went to the president. We presented him with a no-cost jobs plan. We said we can do these things. Let's set aside this all-or-nothing approach that the president continues to go out across this country and campaign about.
Okay, but let's talk about the big parts of the Obama plan. $100 billion in new spending on roads, bridges, and schools. For it or against it?
Well, we believe that there's a need for some infrastructure spending in this country, absolutely. But I think what you've got to look at is the president has gone across this country and found bridges and roads where he says, see, this is why we need spending. And I think what that does is remind people that the stimulus bill that he created and passed didn't address the problems. There's a reason. Because the process of approvals is so weighed down and the bureaucratic red tape so thick you can't get the money to the jobs. So we say let's reform the system. Let's go about redoing the permitting process so we can actually get those shovel-ready jobs that he speaks about, the money that they need. So absolutely.
But if you could get the re-permitting, in effect taking some of the red tape and cutting it, would you go for the $100 billion in infrastructure, new spending?
Well, what we want to see is we want to see the state set-asides done away with. Right now, when states have monies that come from the federal programs, they're required to set aside 10% of those funds for projects that really are not priority. Bike paths and others that are nice things, but frankly, right now, the infrastructure of this country needs to be dealt with. So it's about reform, Chris. Yes, we are for infrastructure spending, but it's about reforming the system so we're not throwing good money after bad and we can actually get the job done.
What about in the Obama plan, $35 billion for states so that they don't have to lay off teachers, police, firefighters?
Here we go again. I mean, this is the type of monies, and these are the type of programs that the president advocated in this stimulus program. I think that the country understands Washington doesn't create jobs. We believe in private enterprise. We believe the way you get the economy going again is to focus on the business country, every one of which started with an entrepreneur making a decision that they were going to invest their time and money to create jobs and to create an ongoing concern. We need that kind of activity. That's priority right now. We saw what happened with the stimulus money. Much of that went to the states, and you know what happened? It sustained some jobs for about a year, and then the states were faced with billions of dollars in debt once that year was over with.
You know, I get the sense, and forgive me if I'm wrong, I don't want to put words in your mouth, that you don't want to be portrayed as an obstructionist. Yeah, we want to do business, but basically you oppose the Obama plan.
Well, we oppose raising taxes on small businesses.
What do you mean? The Senate plan, as it now, would be for millionaires and billionaires. Now, I agree some of them are small businesses, but I mean, we're now talking not about 250,000. We're talking about people making over $1 million a year.
Let me tell you, when I spoke to a small businesswoman in my hometown of Richmond, and she told me, you know, it's hard for me to conduct business right now. And she said, why are you talking about raising taxes in Washington? Because I want to be one of those successful business people, she said. She said, but why is it that you want to go in and take away the kind of hope that I have to be successful? And we know in this country right now that there is a complaint about folks at the top end of the income scales, that they make too much and too many don't make enough. Well, we need to go encourage those at the top of the income scale to actually put their money to work to create more jobs so that we can see a closing of the gap. You know, we're about income mobility, and that's what we should be focused on to take care of the income disparity in this country.
Okay, let's talk. I know you brought it here, the Republican plan. The president has repeatedly said Republicans don't have an economic plan. In fact, you've got it right there. The House introduced a jobs plan last May. Let's break it. Review and roll back costly regulations. Cut the top corporate and individual tax rate to 25%. Cut trillions in spending. Why is that a better way to create jobs?
Well, we've seen that the other way doesn't work. We've seen the stimulus bill that the president put forward in the beginning of his term, I think, certainly did not reach the promises that he made. There's too many people unemployed in this country. We believe in private enterprise. We believe in small business. Our Job Creators agenda is just that. And so we want the president to work with us. We want him to stop the campaigning. Let's go find the things that are in common between this plan and his. And in fact, Chris, I think you'll see us within the next month. We will take portions of this plan that match up with his, put them across the floor to help small businesses.
All right, but here's the issue. The president points out that Moody's Analytics, one of the top economic consulting firms, scored his plan, figured what impact it would have, and says it would add 1.9 million jobs next year and grow the economy by an additional 2%. And he issued this challenge. Listen.
Show us the Republican jobs plan that independent economists would indicate would actually put people back to work. I haven't yet seen it.
Congressman Cantor, do you have an independent analysis that shows how this plan would grow the economy and add jobs?
First of all, I would say as to the Moody's economists that the president speaks to, they and their chief economist was the one that predicted that the stimulus program would keep unemployment from rising above 8%. So I think we need to raise some questions about that assessment.
But in fairness, first of all, he was an economic advisor to John McCain in 2008, sure. Mark Zandi, and the fact is a lot of the private economic firms say whether it's 1% or 2% growth, 1 million jobs or 2 million jobs, that it would have some stimulative effect.
Well, let's look at this.
But here's a simple question. Do you have independent scoring of what your plan would do?
We put forward a plan in the beginning of the year, our budget, okay, and we had independent Congressional Budget Office scoring. which did several things. It talked about the fact that our plan actually dealt with the one crisis, bringing down the debt and deficit over $6 trillion. And it did talk about the ability for our plan to grow new jobs, yes. So we've got that kind of analysis.
But you don't on this jobs plan.
Well, but what this jobs plan is taking pieces of our overall vision for this country and saying, you know what, we've got to provide incentive for the private sector to grow. You know, look at the facts, Chris. Since the president has taken office, there's been 1.6 million jobs lost in the private sector, net. We've also seen the fact there's 7.5 million foreclosures during this president's term. Obviously, his economic plans are not working. That's why we're trying to say we've got to change directions here. We've got to focus on private enterprise and small business. We've got to get the entrepreneurs back in the game. That's what our plan does.
But let me point out what Mark Zandi, and you've raised legitimate questions about him because, you know, like most economists, he's not always right. He's the chief economist at Moody's Analytics. Here's what he says about your proposals. Generally good longer-term economic policy, but they won't mean much for the economy and job market in the next year.
Well, there's a lot of dispute about Mark Zandi and his predictions because of the results of the stimulus plan that he lauded. I mean, we know...
But the argument is simply that if you don't have a lot of immediate spending, and look, I agree, you know, that didn't work well in Stimulus 1, but the argument is if you don't have some spending and some immediate tax relief, that you're not going to stimulate jobs in the short term, that putting back regulations, lowering taxes is really good long-term economics, but it might not give a short-term boost to the economy.
We believe, Chris, the best way is to provide incentives for investment to create jobs. We are for tax relief for small business, and we believe and agree with the president that business expensing is something that we can provide entrepreneurs right now, and you'll see us bring a bill forward. Hopefully the president will agree to work with us. I think finally now he's talking about actually joining us in these incremental approaches rather than his all-or-nothing plan that has died in the Senate now.
Okay, I got 2 minutes and I got two questions I want to ask you. The Congress's so-called super committee now has just a little over a month. November 23rd is the deadline for it to come up with $1.2 trillion in deficit reduction. Do you think they're going to be able to work out a deal and avoid these automatic triggers, which would include $600 billion in more Pentagon cuts?
Yes, I do think that the Joint Select Committee is going to be successful in reaching the goal of getting at least $1.2 trillion in cuts. And in fact, Chris, I served on the Biden discussions, and to the Vice President's credit, it was that committee that actually produced a blueprint that I think can form the basis of getting to the $1.2 trillion.
So you're confident the super committee will make a deal?
I am. I think folks in this town on both sides of the aisle know that we can't fail. There has to be success and an outcome here.
Finally, I want to take you back to your remarks a week ago about Occupy Wall Street. Here they are.
I, for one, am increasingly concerned about the growing mobs occupying Wall Street and the other cities across the country.
Congressman, do you stand by that comment about mobs? And what do you think of the effort by the Obama White House and the Democrats to try to harness the energy, the movement here as part of their re-election effort?
Yeah, Chris, important than my use of that word is the fact that there is a growing frustration out there across this country, and it's warranted. Too many people are out of work. But where I'm most concerned is we have elected leaders in this town who, frankly, are joining in an effort to blame others rather than focusing on the policies that have brought about the current situation. I mean, when you hear some of the Democratic elected leaders joining in, blaming parts of our economy and society versus let's take some of the credit or blame here in Washington. I mean, these are policies that they put into place, and there's a lot that can be done here in this town to turn the economy around and promote, again, income mobility, not go in and excoriate some who have been successful. We want success for everybody.
Congressman Cantor, thank you. Thank you for coming in today, and it's always a pleasure to talk with you, sir.
Chris, thanks.